Ujo, Ogajige Higanen and Dishnakas, Magazine Dodam, Mississauga and Dow, New Credit Dunje. Che me Gwechawe, non de Bamadezewe. Chi me Gwechawe, non de Bamadezewe. Che me Gwechawe, non de Bamadezewe. Chi me Gwechawe, non de Bamadezewe. Che me Gwechawe, non de Bamadezewe. Chi me Gwechawe, non de Bamadezewe. This is an old lodge song that tells everybody that we give thanks to the Creator and that we all want that good life. And part of being having a good life is having good knowledge and good words to help us to build our spirit and to enrich our minds. So I come here to give you an insight into the treaties and that took place between the Crown and the Mississauga Nation. And if you ever watch the land acknowledgement of the Crown with the Lieutenant Governor, she acknowledges the Mississaugas as the treaty holders of the land. There's been many First Nations that have been here, but the Mississaugas are the only ones that hold the treaties to the land. And I like that because if we're dealing with who the Mississaugas are, because they're the treaty holders, then that's what you should be studying. It irks me though that the treaty holders that we have with our belts are being misrepresented by the Haudenosaunee. The 5 nations at that time made treaties with us. And it might be that it's proper for them to say what they say when they're only saying it in relationship to the 5 nations land. But it's not, we don't fall into the same category as they do. If you notice that they call it the dish with one spoon, and we call it the dish with many ladles. And that's reason that they call it one spoon is because we only gave them one spoon to eat from out of the bowl. And that wasn't given to any other, it wasn't given to any of the Oneida, it wasn't given to any of the Onondaga or the Cayuga or the Seneca. It was only given to the Mohawks because they were the ones who were doing the dealing with the dish, one spoon. And the only reason they did that was because they were slowly being annihilated. In the 1600s, they literally almost wiped out the neutrals. And the neutrals held the area from Niagara Falls down to Lake Erie and almost over to where the Wampum Island is. And they occupied this territory, and but the want and the need and the greed that was given into them was put there because of the need to trade for furs. So that's why when you look at the war that takes place between our people and the Five Nations at that time, it was called the Beaver Wars. And if you can imagine all of the beavers that went from the North American continent over to Europe, plus all the other fine furs that they could trade for. It was a vast killing ground of the environment. And it was with this kind of war that took place, because of the way that they trapped and they hunted, they literally made the ground barren of the animals, the fur-bearing animals. So we were the same way. We would take our furs and we would trade with the French. But after they took over and drove the neutrals and the Petuns, and they started to work on the Huron-Wyandot. The Huron-Wyandot could have mobilized 6,000 warriors at any given time. But after all of the diseases and had hit them, they could only muster 1,000. So it was easier for the Five Nations to drive them out of their homelands. And it was then we couldn't get to the French to trade. The Mohawks set along the northern part of the lake, and in the south, the Seneca controlled the southern shores. So we couldn't get to go to Albany because the Seneca were there. And we couldn't get to go to Montreal because the Mohawks were in the north. So we were being deprived of what we thought. And so a war took place. And like I said, it was called the Beaver Wars. And we started to win this war. And we started to, instead of running away into the bush and taking refuge there, we started to retaliate. And we had the help of the Huron-Wyandot. The Huron-Wyandot were more militarily used to fighting in large numbers. So when they joined forces with us, they organized us into an army that they realized that we had to send a message to the Five Nations that they weren't being hit here and hit there by small groups, that they were being hit by a large military force that was well organized. And so they hit, on one day, they hit all of the areas that were there. The Trent River system, we hit in the south, we hit the Senecas. In the north, the Mississaugas hit the Mohawks and drove them down through the Trent River system because they were good warriors. They were warriors of renown. They were worth. But our numbers and our guns were making a difference, and it was here in the south that the Mississaugas drove the Seneca from out of here. Finally, they had to make and go, and they went to the French and they said, we need to make the great peace. And the French said, that's all right, you can have a great peace, but first you have to make amends to our allies, because if they're not going to agree to it, we can't agree to it. So they sent their canoes out. And when they sent their canoes out, they carried their belts. They carried their belts on the front of their canoes so that the Anishinaabe would know that they were coming in peace. And it's written in this belt that the first council fire that they came to was at Sault Ste. Marie. Sault Ste. Marie is an old neutral ground where even we would come to settle our disputes. If somebody was trespassing on another person's land, they would come in and say, well, who really owns this land? It belonged to the Martins, but the Cranes are outnumbering them now. So we are going to divide the land up so that part of this will go one and part will go the other. So Sault Ste. Marie was a place where, so this is the first place that they went to. They went to Sault Ste. Marie and they negotiated and they asked for peace. They had to get the other council fires to agree as well. So the next council meeting place that they went to was Wacomican on Manitoulin Island, a stronghold of the Odawas. And there it was kept by a great white fish. And we have a white fish, but it's not the fish that we're talking about. The white fish wasn't a dicamic, which means the caribou of the water, because there's so many whitefish. It was kept by a white catfish. He's a brown catfish, but he's an albino. He's an albino white fish, and he had the responsibility of keeping the council fire there lit until the end of time. So that's a long, long time, and to keep a fire going. But the fire is doesn't have to be a continuing lit fire physically. The fire that's lit has to be inside of the heart of the nation, of the people that are keeping it. So it's that memory that's there is always to be brought to the people's attention, so that when they hear the story of this belt, then it relights their knowledge inside of them, so the future generation will catch on and be able to remember the history of their people. So the next council fire is at Beaujolais. And it's at Beaujolais that it was kept by a beaver. And he used to be kept that fire lit. The next fire that is lit is at Rama. And you'll see this is a wampum shell, and it's signified because at Rama, they tied a wampum shell to the belt. And the wampum shell was a significance that it would be there so that every time that the people seen that wampum shell, it was to remind them that the Creator remembered when the treaty was made. And so that's Rama. And the last council fire is by a great bald-headed eagle who sits upon the top of a tall pine tree at the mouth of the Credit River. And there he watches all of the council fires that are burning, including the Six Nations council fires. So if there was a problem in the land, then the eagle was to fly to every one of the council fires on here and warn them that there was a disturbance in the land. And when the Six Nations now started to change things and try to push a history that is not the reality of what we had when we first made this treaty, then that's a disturbance. So I took the council meetings from 1840. In 1840, the Six Nations came to us, and what they came to us was to ask to hunt on this side of the lake. And when they came, they brought this belt. It was a belt that was made, and it's called, they call it the dish with one spoon. And so they brought John Buck. And John Buck was, if you look at the wampum belt, you'll see these chiefs sitting around, and John Buck's in the center, and John Johnson, and he's Pauline Johnson's father. He's quite the orator at his time. He's the head speaker for the Six Nations people. And they come to ask to be able to share the land and to be able to hunt on this side of the lake. Because that's what this belt says to them. They said that there's a sharing in the land, so that if one doesn't have as much deer, that he could borrow deer from his neighbor and go and hunt there. And so they bring this belt, and John Buck goes over the history of it, because every time that a belt like this was brought out, there was a string of wampum added to it to renew its life and to bring it back so that they could remember what the original words were that were given when this thing was made in 1701. And they're utilizing it now. They're polishing the belt. But their story does not tell anything about this belt. And this belt was what they used to negotiate this treaty. So when they went to the different council fires, they came. And so John Buck tells about the sharing, but he also tells about the history of it. And he said the first time that it's brought out up near Montreal. And he Cognawabe. So that's where they come, and it's our speaker for this belt. His name is Meskwaki, Yellowhead, and he's the head of, because each one of these had a dotem, and the eagle was ours, and at Rama it was a caribou. And it was a white, they call it a white deer, but we know it as a caribou, a dick. And that's why they tie this shell on this belt, so that they will remember the words that were spoken then. And so Meskwaki says, yes, there's a sharing. But when the dish with many ladles, that's what they call this belt, the dish with many ladles, not the dish with one spoon, but the dish with many ladles, was brought out. Only one spoon was given to the Six Nations people, and that was to the Mohawks. God, we're sorry to say that there was no spoon given to the Six Nations. And so they can't hunt on this side of the lake unless they're coming to a council fire to smoke the pipe of peace. And if you can see in the back, you'll see the eagle that's flying there. And the three fires that are there are the Three Fires Confederacy. And that pipe that's on the bottom is a pipe that they used to smoke the pipe of peace in that last period of time. And so when that takes place, the next place that they come is next time that they bring the belt out is near in Buffalo, New York, actually. And so the third time that they come to go, they go to the western end of Lake Erie. And there they meet at a river, and it's there John Buck says, and then treacherously, the Shoshone wanted to come and kill all of the Six Nations. And if you really read the, it's what you call them there, the colonial records from New York State, they kept all of the records that the Crown made in that period of time. And so they meet at that mouth of the river, and it's an Odawa chief that stands up and he says, no, there'll be no fighting here. No bloodshed coming because they bring the dish with one spoon. There's not supposed to be any bloodshed around it. Otherwise, the belt gets, treaty isn't there. That truth, respect, and honor that's supposed to be, if you notice on these belts, they're white. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 roads on this belt, and on this belt, there's only one, and they're called the roadways, and they represent, like I said, truth, honor, and respect. But it was easy to get lost on a belt like this because it only had one roadway. So they might have honor, but they don't have respect, and they don't have. So when that's why Meskwaki, and there was a yellowhead back when this belt was made. He tied that shell on here so our people would remember what they said to us. And he said to us that then that you only have one spoon to eat on this, and it's not the Mohawks of the Grand River that can come and hunt on this side of the lake. It's only the Mohawks of Cockblock. So none of you can come over here and hunt unless you're coming to smoke a pipe of peace. So the belts keep that history for us. But if we don't remember what was said in those ancients of time, then we've lost our connection with the past. We've lost that roads that can lead us to teach the future generations. And I'm sad to say that our school systems are doing a terrible job. And I'm not talking about the white man's school system. I'm talking about our very own school systems are not teaching anything about the bells and our side of the story, because it takes two to make a peace treaty like this. And so we are happy that in 1840 that these were documented, and they were documented by the and they're in the archives of Canada, the Poudage papers, because he kept our council records from 1832 to 1848. So in 1840, he keeps a record of all of the chiefs that come to this meeting, and he doesn't know all of the the other chiefs, the only two chiefs that he documents are John Buck and John Johnson, Mohawk chief that does the talking. And so when you read this, the documentation of it, you also understand that they knew about the council record file because they make a description of it too. They said the first council fire was held at Sault Ste. Marie, and it has no emblem because that's where it was held. The second belt was kept by a beautiful white fish who keeps the fire going till the end of time, and that he's white because he has a heart and to share with us. The third council fire is kept by a beaver, and it's the wisdom of the beaver that helps to make the treaty. And it's the strength of the white deer that keeps this treaty alive. And it's bald-headed eagle who watches over the fires and keeps the peace so that the disturbances in the land will be less, because he will fly to all of the councils. And so at the end of the meeting that takes place in 1840, they bring out 2 strings of wampum, one for the dish with 1 spoon and one for the council fire belt. And it's added to them because it renews the life of the belt. Because every belt, if they're not remembered, then it soon dies. And it dies over a period of time because the people forget what the belts were all about and what the history of them were. And I'm glad that I went and I read these articles so that I could bring the life back to the belts so that we could understand as Anishinaabe people what our history was and where our place in history is today. So the belts are really, really important. And they're made from a shell. And the shell looks like this. And if you see it, you'll see the white part is the white part of the beads, and the purple part is what they made the purple part from. And so the purple, if you were going to sell, would be worth more than the white part, because the whites were not only made from the wampum shell, they were made from other shells. So the next belt that becomes really important to us is this one. And if you look at it, you'll see the rings that those are the chains. They're tied to 2 figures in the center. And the chains that are there symbolize the covenant chain. And that's what I say, the Six Nations people are taking, and they call it, they're shining the covenant chain. But the covenant chain that they're looking at is not this belt. They say that it's the two-row wampum that is the covenant chain. Well, the two-row wampum was not a treaty that was made with the English. It was made with the Dutch. And this belt signifies the covenant chain because it, you can see, it looks almost backwards to me. It is backwards. Yes. Now it looks right. 1764. And this is the year that 1763 is the year of the Royal Proclamation, a part that we weren't a part of. They make all kinds of rules and all kinds of regulations. And it pertains to how they're to purchase the land off of the Anishinaabe. But the Anishinaabe don't understand what the Royal Proclamation is all about. They send the Nipissings out to all of the different Anishinaabe villages, showing them the Royal Proclamation, but they don't understand. They can't read, so they can't see where there's anything there. Fortunately for the British, William Johnson, the English head of Indian Affairs, has a wife, and her name is Molly Brant. And Molly Brant tells him, "You're never ever going to get them to agree to for use to purchase land or to garner anything in a peace treaty because they don't understand paper." So she says, you have to make a wampum belt and have the symbolization on it. And so there is the chain that is there, and there's the year that it's made. And it said the two figures in the middle, one are the colonials, and one represents the Anishinaabe, the indigenous people of North America. And when we bring this belt, you'll look and you'll see the Anishinaabe has a white heart, and his heart is pure and it's kind, and he will share with his colonial brother. And so this belt takes place not at Niagara Falls, because it's called the Treaty of Niagara, but it's not at Niagara Falls that the treaty takes place. It takes place in Niagara-on-the-Lake, a place that they call the Crooked Place. And it's a bend in the river. And because of the bend in the river, they're able to go from one side over to the other side of the river in a safe manner and be able to dock their boats or their canoes on that side. A safe place to cross the river at any time. And so when they make this belt, they call it the covenant chain. They said, and with this chain, the French gave you a chain, but it was made of iron. Our chain is made of silver, and it'll never rust. And so every time that we meet, we should shine the covenant chain, and we should, so that we will remember the words that our ancestors said in the past. And those words are good. They're good words that they said at that time, but they don't live up to them because they can't understand their own words. Oh, it's a bunch of promises that we made to them that really make no sense. And so the words are almost lost. But every time that they bring this belt out and they have to recite what they said. Crown has to do that. And when they do, the Anishinaabe up in Manitoulin Island, they record it. They record it because of the fact that they say that when you came and you made this belt, we said that anytime that you would be in want and in need, that we would come to your aid. And so when the War of 1812 comes, it's the Anishinaabe and the Five Nations that come to the aid of the British and help them to, they defeated the Americans. But the British make a peace treaty in Europe. I'm not without our permission, without our okay or anything. They make a peace treaty with them, and they say that this is a treaty that will be lasting. And so we don't understand why they didn't come to us and tell us about this treaty. And so the British realized that. And so they come to us. And in 1814, they bring this belt out. And this belt is, to us, they say, this belt is here, and we'll honor all the treaties that ever took place in between us and our Anishinaabe parties. And so because we're still fighting, we're still shooting at the Americans, and we're still fighting the Six Nations people that sided with the Americans. And I was going to say they give a good thing, because they have 6 reserves on the American side, and they have 6 reserves here on the Canadian side. But so they're granted land underneath of as Empire loyalists. They come and they're given land over here, and the land is there, but it's like in the Six Nations say to the Crown, this is our land, and we can do anything we want on it. You have no say. And so you made this treaty with us. And so the British do a research on it, and they find different things that are there because they go through the colonial records and they see that on this side that the Six Nations have no treaties here in Canada. Not a one. They don't have any treaties whatsoever. So that's why it irks me that the Six Nations have made an agreement with the Ontario government that the Nanfan deed, in the Nanfan deed, there's something that in 1701, the same time that we make the dish with one spoon, they make a deed with the then Nanfan is a fill-in. The Department of Indian Affairs head dies, and they don't have nobody to replace him. So they call Nanfan from the Bermudas, and he takes over being the temporary head of the. He has no power and authority. He's there to administer everyday things that have to take place in any colonial government. So in 1701, they come to him and they make this offer to the crown. They said, we give up all of our land, but we want expressed hunting and fishing rights wherever our land is. And the Nanfan deed covers territory all the way over from Chicago and land all the way up to Hudson Bay. And so they find out pretty soon that it's not a legal treaty because the original Nanfan deed is in Sussex, England, and it sits in the archives without a royal seal of approval. So it's never ever recognized. And on this side, in 1776, the perpetrators of the Nanfan deed tried to bring it through the council, their council, and it's totally rejected. So their own people reject the Nanfan deed. But here we come into the 20th century, and they convince the Ontario government that the Nanfan deed is a legal and binding treaty with the Crown. And so they get all of the hunting rights and fishing rights that they say that they're entitled to. And it's still to this day, they are utilizing it to hunt and fish on this side of the lake. They're coming into a period where the Anishinaabe, with the Three Fires, are going to retaliate. They're taking them to court because of the fact that the deed was never ever a legal and binding article with the Crown. It's just the Ontario government that who is part of the Crown, because the Crown was split up, federal and provincial. So the provincial part has recognized the Nanpan deed as a legal and binding treaty. So it's holding us back as Anishinaabe people. Our own council here has lost $11.5 million from the windmill. The windmills are here, and any other companies that open up in here, they charge them that this is part of their treaty lands and that you owe us 25% of the income that you make from off of this. Don't quote me for 25%. I know that they get a huge amount. So it's something that from the past that's affecting us in the future. And if we don't do something to rectify it soon, it won't make no difference because they will already have garnished the money and they would already have killed off all of the and fished all of the fish that they can, because the parks and game and environmentalists have to abide by it because it was recognized. So it's becoming a problem to not only the Mississaugas here, but the other parts of the governments like Walpole Island and Manitoulin Island. And in May of this year, they're meeting together. We take this to court because there was a Supreme Court decision made in 1961 that they have no treaties here in Canada. So it's a Supreme Court decision. Why is this still? Because nobody's taking them to court. Nobody's made them own up that this was a piece of I don't know. They pull the wool over the eyes of the crown and laughed all the way to the bank. So I've got to give it to them because they're pursuing, but they're trying to change history, and that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing for us. So in order for us to combat it, we have to know our own history in order to combat the history that they're trying to force upon the general public so that they'll think that they have the right to do whatever they want to. And that's not a good thing for us. I looked at, I went out to Treaty 2 in Manitoba, and they were at the Treaty of Niagara because they say there's over 2,000 chiefs came from all parts of Canada to come and place their hands upon that bell so that they would have that agreement with the Crown. Because the Crown said, if you're ever in need or in want, that you we'll come to your aid. We'll give you firewood so you'll be warm. We'll give you food to feed your children. That was part of their agreement. And we have to hold them to what they is legally ours. So these belts are really, really, really important. But now we come to what we call the paper treaty. And it takes it in 1764 when the British come to bring out the covenant chains, and the people come to place their hands on it, that the chiefs from all over that come to bind with this. But at that time, in 1740, and in that area of time, they have a man, and his name is Pontiac. And I always like a little game when I'm in the school rooms, and I ask them, does anybody know who Pontiac is? And none. It seems like even the teachers can't remember who Pontiac is. Pontiac was an Odawa leader who takes 11 British forts. And he does it, they call it, it was the treacherous way that they did it. But I thought, war, there's no treachery in war. There's only win or lose. And what he did was he would start a game of lacrosse outside of the fort's gates. And invertibly, the ball would go in the inside of the fort, and they would rush in after it. But underneath their cloaks, they weren't carrying, they were carrying guns. And once they got in the inside, they opened fire upon the unsuspecting British soldiers, and they captured the forts. And that's one of the reasons why the Treaty of Niagara is made, because how can they have a colonial place if you don't have peace? And so he has to make peace. That's why they make the Royal Proclamation. But the Royal Proclamation is fine and dandy, but they're still, in 1764, they're still making thefts of land. And so the Crown makes the Quebec Act. And it's really, if you Google it, they'll give you all kinds of things of what the French were subjected to and what they had to endure underneath the British rule. And there's almost a rebellion. They have to make changes inside the Quebec Act so that the French would agree to it. But it doesn't give you any part of what they had to say about the Anishinaabe. It won't give you anything inside of there about it. But there is parts inside of there because they were still finding that the colonials were making treaties that weren't legal. And so they made up more stipulations on how the land had to be purchased. So what they said was that you have to have a British surveyor come, and he has to be a patent. That means that he has a royal commission to be a surveyor. And you have to have one Anishinaabe person that goes along with the surveyor so that he can see what part of the land are the map that they have to make, what part that they're going to purchase. And so when the treaty is made, the map has to be present. And that's where you get your, I guess what you call it, they didn't live up to their own laws. They didn't purchase the land the way that they were supposed to. And so in the treaties that were made in the past, that's where they're fighting for, like the Treaty of Toronto. Treaty of Toronto, there was still no map in 1805 that shows the amount of land that they wanted to purchase. They just take it. And so it's not in 1780, 1790. They make a purchase. They make a purchase of the land, but when they go to look for the signing of the treaty, there's 3 Anishinaabe chiefs on there, but the rest of where the people are supposed to have signed it for the crown, it's blank. So they have to make a new treaty in 1805. And the Mississaugas protested. They pushed the surveyors away, and they tell them, you ain't going to do any surveying here. You didn't make no purchase, and you're not going to have one now. So the British called in Butler's Rangers, the military force. And they tell the Mississaugas, you have to make a treaty. They forcibly make us come to the negotiation table. But we look, and I still say, let's look, let us see the treaties, and let's see the signatories that are on there. And I don't mean that because every time that a chief made his signatory, it was a picture of his totem. Didn't have a name on it, just had a picture of his totem. And the name is written on after the crown puts the name on it. And I look on there, there's one chief on there, and he's been dead for 3 or 4 years. And the crown says, oh, that's because that was the younger. I said, how do they know? How do they know that he was the younger? Show with us, we have to show where we got our information from and put them on footnotes. I don't see anything when the crown says something. Where's their footnotes of where they got the information that this was the younger? So a lot of the treaties that were made with us were illegal, and we're fighting them now. So when the Treaty of Niagara is made, the Seneca say, the crown says we want 4 miles on the one side, so that's American side of the river, and we want 4 miles on the other side of the river. And the Seneca say, okay, all right, we want our hostages back, because the crown takes hostages, because in 1840 they tried to build a fort on the American side, and the Seneca wiped them out to a man. So the crown's then really, they take a hostage, and they want this land, and they stipulate it. So the Seneca say, yeah, well, we'll give you the land, we'll give you the land. So they give them 4 miles on the American side and 4 miles on the Canadian side. And the trouble is that they don't own the land. And the British realized this afterwards, after the fact, that they don't have the land that was given to them by the Seneca doesn't even belong to them. It belongs to the Mississaugas. And so they send William Holloman sends his people to purchase the land. And so what the Crown does is they come to the Anishinaabe and they say, look, we got 300 here, suits, redcoats. We're going to give them to you in the treaty for this 4 miles. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but the suits were not there to purchase the land. They were given to the Anishinaabe for their help in the American Revolution. They're part of that were gifts that the Crown gave to them for fighting on their side. So there was no compensation for it whatsoever. So it's one of the things that are business that we're going to be looking after. So this takes place in 1781. So 1764, 1781, they finally realized the Seneca took them 4 miles on the Canadian side does not even belong to them. So they have to. They want to because they're already building. They're already kind of doing all kinds of things. So this land has never ever been legally purchased by the Crown. And it's one of the treaties that we're going to be fighting for in the future. And then we come out 1792, the Between the Lakes Treaty. And so they call the Anishinaabe together to a general meeting. That's what stipulates that they have to have. They have to have a general meeting between all of the head chiefs of the land that they're going to be purchasing. He doesn't call that many chiefs to his meeting, and the head women. He has a big party, lots of rum, lots is given up. And they take and they say, "Hey, look, we want to purchase this land that's from here to here to here." And so the chiefs, being all full of jolly and everything, they go ahead and they sign for it. Well, the next year, the Crown realizes that the land that they stipulated to the Mississaugas is not the same as what they wanted to purchase. They're lost. They have to have this map. They have to have this. And they have to have the consent of all of the head men. So they call them all together. Well, there's 16 more chiefs come, head men. And the Crown doesn't know what to do. So they say, oh, this is a treaty for the waters, that we can utilize the waters. Because when the Crown makes the purchase of the purchases from before, they said the Anishinaabe said, well, what about the waters? You're going to purchase this land. What about the waters? Well, we don't care about the waters. We don't want to. They realized that they called all these people together, and they haven't got any money to pay them, and so they give 16 shillings to every one of the chiefs, and they say this is for so that we can use your waters. We can use them for traveling, and nobody will disturb us. It's well written out. So they're actually saying that they don't own the waters, but they want to be able to go up and down the rivers in a peaceful manner. And so that the land that they take is way much more than what they had stipulated in the first treaty. And so all they do is just make a map and say this. They've already signed this, and we're not about to change it. But in modern day history, the Anishinaabe people are more realistic, and they realize that the Crown did things in the past that were not up to the laws that they were supposed to bring. When they did any treaties, they had to have that map, and they had to have a surveyor, and they didn't have them. Even in the Toronto Purchase, they didn't have them. So this is the standing part that the Mississauga people are in the courts right now. But you look at the Toronto Purchase, they knew they were wrong, but it took them 20 years to get enough money so that they could say to them, here, we're going to offer you $40 million for the Toronto Purchase. The Anishinaabe said, we said to them, what about the interest? You would have spent it all, they said. And we said, no, we wouldn't. We would have invested it wisely. We had already invested money in the steamship company. So we showed them that that wasn't so. And so the Crown had to realize that we would have, they recognized it, that we would have had, so there we gave them, we got 140 million out of it. There's not much money. But being the wise businessman that we are, people that we have, we took that money and we invested it in good companies. We invested in, they run a new power line from the Six Nations all the way down to Niagara Falls. But they're going right through our territory. We told them that. So they said, oh yeah, well, so we purchased money in that power line. And last year we went through our how much we garnered from off of the power line. And like power never goes down. So we, it was steadily coming across $7 million each year. So that's money that goes into our coffers. And the other businesses, we're not doing too bad on them. Not as maybe as good as the one on hydro, but still steady income, still keeping in. So our money that that we had gotten from the past is building up. It's not going down. So we're able to give our people $1,500, guaranteed $1,500 That means every man, woman, and child. So the more babies you have, the more money you get. Maybe that's why my daughter had 5, and my oldest son, he's got 5. So it's, as they grow up, they just think 5 times 1,500 plus your own 1,500. And if your wife's from here, that's a lot of money. And so it's working in our favor. So now we're coming to treaties that are unceded territory. That means that the Crown never ever purchased it. And the reason why is because 1921, they make the Williams Treaty. And all of the other Mississaugas are forced to sign it. They get $10,000 for this. So a lot of them are poor. They end up signing it. But the Mississaugas of the Credit refused to sign the Williams Treaty. And so we're not part of it. And so the unceded territories that we have are still there. And one of them is where the Rouge River is. Along the Rouge River on this side, the biggest part, they're going to make a big park there. So we're part of it. But they still haven't compensated us for the purchase of that land. And it don't only take in the park, it takes up part of Markham. It takes up a pretty good chunk of land that is unceded. That means that they never were purchased. And they can't force us saying we were part of the Williams Treaty is because we weren't. So we're looking at the Brant Tract now, 1797. 1797, Joseph Brant, for his service to the Crown and everything else, they give him a huge tract of land. And thing of it is they don't even make a treaty with us. They just go ahead and they take the land and they give, like all other things, they go ahead and they give the land. So they give it to Joseph Brant. And the land never ever gets settled until the Toronto Purchase. And they said, well, we're going to throw this in too, in along with the Toronto Purchase. We'll throw in the Brant Tract, so we'll get it under the way too. So they're getting 2 treaties that they cheated us out in the beginning in one parcel. So it's still not working in our way. I always look at it. And then you get the Adjutants To Purchase. 1818. It's a huge tract of land that's north of there. And they said, well, you should sell this land. You should give us, let the Crown look after this land for you, because if you don't, some unscrupulous people like the Americans will come over here and steal it away from you. Oh no, we can't let that happen. So they go ahead and they say, oh well, we're going to get you get this land. You signed the treaty, 2 weeks later, they got all of the lands, they're got them in plots, and they're ready to sell them. Then they say, the Mississaugas say to them, well, where's our money? You told us you were going to keep this in trust. Never ever gets settled down. They end up not getting anything out of it. Then you get the Treaty 22 and 23, both made in 1820. And it comprises land that's from Toronto all the way over to Burlington Bay. But we protest. We don't want any part of that treaty. Oh, we won't give it away. It's okay. We're not going to do anything. We want 1 mile from the lake inward to the land so that we can practice our fishing and our along the lake, because it's fertile and full of game. But they take it anyway. So it's going to be one of our land claims that's in the future. You can only do so many land claims at a time. So and I don't know, I think it's because they have to get the money in order to pay us. And they try to get the best deal that they can. Well, why not? We try to get the best deal that we can for the loss of the land, for the loss of our. But I heard the other day that that land, they're trying to get rid of it. They're trying to sell it off because. And how can they sell it off when they don't even own it? That's the way I look at it. So you got the Rouge. What we got? This is our claims. The Rouge tract claim was submitted in 2015, and that's the land where the Rouge River is. And so it's a huge tract of land. And they're still negotiating with us. Because I always look at it like it took 20 years for the Rouge River to the Toronto Purchase to be settled. It's going to take at least 20 years for them to settle the Rouge Treaty as well. That's going to be a long time. If I look at it, we submitted it in 2015. It takes another 20 years. I'll be like about 91 or 92 years old. But my children and my grandchildren will benefit by it, because we know the history that's in behind it. And the way that we find it is through the colonial records and through our own council records and how they dealt with us. So these treaties are important, and we have them all marked out. And I was when Catherine Wynne was the premier, I said to her, I said, we have a record of all of the treaties that you made with us. And it was made in 1923, this map. And she said, oh, I didn't know that. So the Ontario government did not know anything about any of the lands or any of the treaties that were made in the past. and they weren't aware of it. And so by waking them up and making them aware of their land thefts, we're in, they only allow us one treaty at a time. I guess they'll have to start saving all of the good money to make sure that the paper treaties have money to be able to pay us. And I don't know how long I'm supposed to be talking, but I think it's pretty close. I thought maybe somebody would like to have some questions.
We do, Elder Garry, have a couple of questions. If we're okay to move on to the Q&A segment of the webinar. A couple of people are putting their questions into the webinar now. So I'll just read off the questions that are coming in right now. So the first question, if you could clarify the Wampum agreement between the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. So is the Credit River lands part of the dish with one spoon wampum?
You have to look that they have no, underneath of the dish with one spoon, the Six Nations have no treaties on this side of the lake. And that's stipulated in the 1840 Potash Papers that were that's the last time that they brought the dish with one spoon out. So we have a clear record of it, of what the negotiations and what the agreements took place in that period of time. And if you want to read them, I sent a copy to, they're all in typed out form. And the reason that they're typed, if you get the originals, they're all handwritten. They're all handwritten. And that's the ones that I first got were all handwritten. And I got them, and I got them through the library because I couldn't get them myself. I went to the library and I asked them to give me the Potash Papers and go ahead, and they sent me a copy of that, the records of the 1840 council meeting. But we had and she's still here. Her name is Margaret Saul, and she was our keepers of record from the, let's see, she's 20 years ago, 20, 40, somewhere around about 30 years ago, she took over taking care of the records. And she didn't have a high school education. And so they asked her what she was going to do in order to better herself. She said, I'm taking a typing course. So she had one of these old typewriters, and she learned how to type. And then what she did in order to do something, she typed out all of the Potash records. She typed them out. So that when I got I said to them, I said, look what I found, Margaret. And I showed her, oh, she said, I typed them all out years ago. And I said, could you give me a copy? So she got me a copy, and I put them in PDF form. I got them put into PDF form, and those are the ones that I sent to Tabitha, so that anybody who wants to get a copy of the record, then you can read it, and you can read and understand that nobody has any right to hunt on this side of the lake unless you're a Mississauga. And even the Mississaugas, like the Mississaugas of Rice Lake, the Mississauga, they're not allowed to come and hunt in our territory. So we have records that go back into the 1700s when they ask us how big our territory was. Because Butler goes and he goes and he looks for all of the harbors and everything. He does a survey of all of the land. He said, this is a good spot. This is a good spot for this. This is a good spot for that. And he asked the chiefs how big their territory are. And I imagine the first chief that he was talking to was probably from around the Rouge River. Because when he describes it, he said, along the Rouge River, to the ridge that divides the waters from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario. Along that ridge to the headwaters of the Thames. Then straight down to the lake. Along the lake to the Niagara River. Down the Niagara River and to Lake Ontario, and then northward to the Rouge. So that's the description of how big the Mississaugas were at that time. So when they asked our leader Peter Jones, he's not the chief either. People always call him the chief, but he was like the adjutant for what's his name? It's coming to me. Sawyer. So Sawyer, John Sawyer, he's the chief at that time, and he Peter Jones only does, but they asked him. They asked Peter Jones how big the territory of the Mississaugas is, and he uses Point Pelee, and he gives the same description from Point Pelee to the Niagara Lake, down the river to Lake Ontario, to the Rouge, to the Rouge, along the Rouge, to where the waters divide, to the headwaters of the Thames, down to down to Lake Erie, and back over to Point Pelee. Very similar, but the description of the of what the Mississaugas and the credits land base is, there's no difference. So there's no sharing with anybody for us. They could say what they want according to the dish with one spoon, but when you listen to the records of 1840, you realize that their hunting grounds are on the American side, not over here in Canada.
And for the other folks who have sent us in some questions looking for access to those records, if you want to send us an email at info@theriverwoodconservancy.org, we'll be able to send those records out to you. The PDF is available, and Tabitha Shergold from the Indigenous Network has been good enough to share that with us. So we'll make sure that you get them if you are interested in it. And just in the interest of time, we'll get to one last question for today, and it's I guess a little bit of clarification on if you could just differentiate between the dish with many ladles wampum compared to the dish with one spoon. What is the difference between those two?
Well, we call it the dish with many ladles because each area, each council fire is going. There's 11 of these belts that are put in, so the Americans get one, the Mohawks get one, and then each one of those council fires will get one. So I imagine the other ones went to, because they had to make peace with the Algonquins too. They're not going to get away with without having them in the picture. Now, I don't see them in the inside of there, but they had to have been part of that because they were making war against the Five Nations at that time too, as well. History records. So that's why we call it that's why they call it the dish with one spoon, and the reason it being that we only gave them one spoon.
Understood. And one more time for the audience watching today, info at the riverwoodconservancy.org. If you send us an email letting us know that you're interested in the records that we referenced earlier today, we'll make sure to send you a copy of that. And I want to say today to everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us today. For our main presenter today, Elder Garry Sault, I want to say thank you for your service, your formal U.S. Navy veteran. And I'm also offering you this tobacco for speaking about wampum and paper treaties. I wish we could give this to you in person, and we will the next time that we see you in person. Also to Tabitha Shergold from the Indigenous Network, offering you this tobacco for your assistance in the presentation today. And for Vivian Ricole, who is on the webinar right now, even though her camera may be off, offering you this tobacco for your assistance in making the presentation possible today. So miigwech to all three of you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. Thanks as well to the Community Foundation of Mississauga for making today's webinar possible. And to everyone watching, thank you for sharing your time with us today. We hope to see you again soon, and all the best for the remainder of the year. Happy holidays, and miigwech again for joining us today. Thanks again.
Oh, and don't forget to give them Alan Corbier's from the Ojibway Historical Society. It's a article that was written, and you have to follow it to the very end, but it will give you a breakdown of Alan Corbier's treaty of the dish with one spoon.
Perfect. Well, thanks for adding that one on, Elder Garry. We'll make sure that all those documents are available to anyone who sends an email to us looking for more information. So once again, from all of us, to everyone watching today, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Miigwech to all of our presenters once again, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care for now.